So, in chapter 1101, we get a very interesting shot of Bonnie's distortion future in which she becomes NIKA. So, what does this mean? Can the age fruit turn Bonnie into some sort of rogue from X-Men and she can copy all the devil fruits in the world as long as she can imagine them? Woo! No, that's not it. At least I don't think that's it, because that would break canon. But here's what I think is going on for realsies, okay? So, what's happening with the distortion future technique of Bonnie's age fruit? I think, first of all, that's probably the most useful technique of all of the abilities of the age fruit. But to sort of make things short in a way, she's just Chopper. She's just Chopper. What do I mean by that? Chopper has the human fruit, right? In having the human fruit as a reindeer, he has a multitude of different forms that are basically weird variations of what a human looks like. Coincidentally, it ends up being what humans look like in One Piece, especially after the time skip, because his Kung Fu Poi looks like the weird humans on that bird kingdom place. They look like cavemen, but they're actually very technologically advanced, and they live alongside these giant birds. Kung Fu Poi ends up looking like that, right? So with Bonnie, it's more along the lines of she is becoming what she can possibly be in, I guess, several timelines. So what she could possibly be as a human in the world of One Piece, because now we have her basically going within the lines of a lot of body types that we've seen in One Piece. Like, for example, the big muscular state that she's used very often at this point has the same proportions as a Buccaneer, but I don't think it's turning her into a Buccaneer. I think it's just like One Piece strongman body shape, because we see that in other characters before. Like, for example, Frankie has that body shape. Big on the top, small on the bottom. That's not new. You know, Frankie's a cyborg. There are other characters that have that same body shape. Now, with the super big gear third arm that we see in chapter 1101, I think that's a callback to like a big human along the lines of, say, Big Mom or some of those weird guys from the Frankie family. There are just big humans in the One Piece world that aren't giant sized, but are bigger than average. And that's the type of fist I think Bonnie summoned when she punched Alpha in the latest chapter. I don't think it's anything like she became a giant. I think it's more along the lines of she just manifested a big human arm and she punched Alpha with it, because her like becoming different races too is also out of the wheelhouse of the ability, because even if she distorted her future, she's starting from a point in which she's a human. So why would a distorted future result in her being a member of a different race? I can see a distorted future in which she just grows up to be really, really big. That's a possibility. Or a distorted future in which she grows up to be really, really beefy. That's a possibility. But a distorted future in which she is like a fish man or a giant or a buccaneer or a Lunarian, that just doesn't make sense to me, because she's starting from ground zero as a normal human. So she can only achieve what normal humans can achieve. So perhaps in a distorted future, she's just really, really big. So she manifests as a big human's arm. That's what I think is going on. It's not this magical Del Fruit copying machine. It's not that. And when she wanted a NIKA-ish future, I think the Del Fruit just compensated for her imagination and gave her the closest approximation of what it could do to fulfill her wishes. Which, I guess, in this situation, even though she doesn't have any context of what NIKA could do other than it being a rubber being, is that she just makes her arm big. She kind of, in a way, stretches out. And by stretching out, she just makes it bigger and therefore makes it longer, therefore accomplishing the whole goal of stretching out, which is a weird roundabout way of saying that, but that's what I think is happening, which then goes in line with the whole limitations of the fruit, because there could be a possible future in which she is a big human, so she just manifests a big human's arm. That's really kind of a simplification of what's going on, but I think with the distorted future technique, that's all it is. It's giving actual possibilities for her based on what she was already. She's basically a tiny human and being like a little girl who can then transform into different humanoid shapes. Much how like Chomper, well, Chomper chooses to be tiny, but Chomper is most of the time a tiny little hybrid guy who can then turn into bigger states. So Bonnie and Chomper are in a roundabout way the same in that way. Seeing as how we see that transformation is kind of her main methodology for fighting. Now, when it comes to the other stuff, like the pushing the age out of people, that age turning into like these little rock candy crystals, that I honestly think is more interesting now with context than it was at the start. Seeing as how she did have the sapphire scale disease, I wonder, was that always a part of the ability, or is that something that she just thought of and she kind of was just able to do? I kind of want to say the former because it just makes sense that that's a power of the fruit, but it's very interesting thematically given how she was afflicted with an illness that was jewels, essentially, that appeared like jewels on her flesh. So that's just an interesting coincidence, I guess. But the thing about the jewels in general, I think it operates on the same kind of rules as Kuba's pain bubbles. So when he pushes aspects out of a person, maybe he doesn't have to apply by the same rules because his memories are literally sitting in Vegapunk's lab and they aren't too quick to return to him. So maybe it's different for him. But at least for other people, he says that when he pushes the pain out of a person, it eventually has to return to the source if it isn't being received by somebody else. Which kind of makes sense because now you've kind of made this feeling and put it in an unnatural state, so it can't necessarily stay that way. So I think that's the same way with Bonnie. Like, when she pushes the jewels out of a person, I don't think those jewels are able to just stick around. They either have to be eaten or absorbed, I guess, by another person, or they just return to the person that they were pushed out of in the first place, which is super interesting. Also, another thing about her ability is that it can affect animals, which is a real funny cheat that you get from Chomper being around her, Luffy, and Jinbei at the start of Egghead Island. But yeah, her ability does work on animals because it aids Chomper. So that's something I've never heard anyone say, but that's just an interesting thought. Like, it can also affect animals too. I don't know if that will be important later, but that's a very interesting thought that her ability can affect things other than humans. And we see too that much like Shinobu, it can also affect objects. So I don't know what that will mean going forward. But that's also a very interesting aspect of it. And apparently, unlike Shinobu and Ain, if you know her from Film Z, her ability does not seem to be permanent. It's permanent for Bonnie. Like, she can stay whatever age she wishes for however long she wishes. She can even go from one extreme to her 22-year-old state, as that seems to be the state she prefers, much like how Chopper prefers to stay in his hybrid state. But it seems like, unlike her Devil Fruit contemporaries in Shinobu and Ain, anything she does to an individual seems to be something that only lasts for a short while. Now, another interesting aspect of it that only appears in Stampede, but I want to know if this is an actual thing or not. Because from Stampede, we also see that this is the first example of her Dofro ability being able to work on animals because she ages up some doves. But in aging up the doves, they already know how to fly as soon as they're hatched. So if she distorts someone's future or ages them up, can she actually imbue that being with the experience they would have if they were to grow up normally? I don't know. That's just an interesting thing. Like, if she did this to Momo, for example, instead of Shinobu aging up Momo, even though it would be impermanent, would he be able to use his Devil Fruit expertly like Kaido, as if he got like 20 years of experience with it? I don't know. That's just an interesting thought, because Shinobu and Ain can't affect experience, but at least in a movie, it's being suggested that Bonnie can. So that's why I'm super interested in her if she really does join and if she is the 10th. I made a whole video about that. But also, just a little side note in which I think why she's probably going to join is because she's just the SBS gag. Has anyone thought about this? Like the SBS drawing thing of which Otis asked, how would this character look if everything went well and they end up being 70 or 60 or whatever? And this is the other timeline if everything went terribly wrong. And this is how they would end up looking 40 and 60 or what have you. She's just that. That's what body powers do. Like, because of Bonnie, if she is on the crew, he can make all those just canon coincidences or just canon events. Like, he could turn Nami into some chain-smoking old lady if he wanted to with Bonnie on the crew. I just think that's funny because that's so interesting. And that's good for espionage stuff or just funny gags. That's just a good gag in itself. And since it's impermanent, there's no harm, no foul. But overall, I think that Bonnie will be very funny if she does join. But no, I don't think her distortion future technique is anything other than what I said it was. It's just pulling possibilities for her into the forefront. But these possibilities are what she's capable of doing as a human. So growing big, becoming muscular, these are all very real possibilities that exist in the One Piece world for a human to achieve. But there's no race swapping or dough fruit swapping going on. That's not happening based on what we know about Bonnie so far. But with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I made a age fruit video way before it was even called the age fruit, and I predicted everything on the letter. So go watch that. And I got a video about her being the possible 10th Straw Hat. There are a lot of hints that she really could be. But yeah, go check those out and I'll see you next time.